So we are officially recording the session. I am going to ask that you keep your cameras on. It's really, it makes us more comfortable if we can see your faces, because then we don't feel like we're talking to a computer screen. But as well, it allows us to know if maybe there's something that we need to talk a little bit more on, or if there's questions that maybe aren't going to be said out loud. So that just kind of gives us a little bit of insight into how things are going. Please keep yourself muted until the Q&A, and that will be at near the end of the session. We'll be going through an agenda here in a few minutes. Okay, so, oh, you can't see me. I move this over here.
I can see you.
There's me. I'm Lisa Ryan, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself as a quick introduction. So I am a mom to a little girl named Eva. That's her right there. She's absolutely fantastic and is really the joy of my life. As well, I've been married to my partner of 5 years, and he is the reason why we are now located here. So if you want someone to blame or what have you for this current situation that we're in, you're more than welcome to blame him, because he's what brought me here to Bridgewater. And as well, I've been working in the housing and homelessness sector for the past 5 years. But a part of my personal story is that I actually experienced my own bout of homelessness when I was a young woman. And that has helped shape who I am today. And why I'm bringing up all of that is because as we move forward in creating this coordinated access system, I'm going to invite you all to bring your whole self to the table. So not just the things that make up your professional resume, but also the things that make up your personal life and the things that have shaped you, the experiences that have brought you to be who you are, because those are the things that will help inform and create a knowledge around our system and really help shape the way that we see things. And we need to have the same grace and understanding for others to be able to bring their whole selves to the table. Okay. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq, the Maliseet peoples, first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq, Maliseet title, and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between the nations. We must remember that acknowledging territory, while it is welcome, it is only a small part of cultivating strong relationships with First Peoples of Canada, the caretakers of this land. Now more than ever, we must ensure the work we embark on is informed by recommendations set forth in the Truth and Reconciliation Act, which will lead us to challenge colonialism and racism that is prevalent within our systems. This will be a very important part of how we shape our system. So just to quickly go through our agenda, we've already done our welcome and land acknowledgement, which will become something that we do every time we meet. And I'm going to next go into the overview of the year timeline. We're going to have Nelson Nolan do a presentation on Energized Bridgewater. And as well, I'm pleased to be able to say that we have Jody Urowski-Pace from the CAEH Training and Technical Department come to do a presentation on coordinated access. Shortly thereafter, we'll have a Q&A session. Then we'll wrap up and say our goodbyes, and I will be giving you some more details at the end. So here is our project timeline. As you can see, we've already started the work in 2020, and the town had issued the contract to myself in October. And we've begun doing some brainstorming and some idea generation. That's translated into coffees with some of you and being able to think and look at what's going on within the town of Bridgewater and really try to come up with a plan of action on how we move forward. In January, we'll be embarking on our strategic planning, which will be members of the community, yourselves, all coming together to really make a plan on how we move forward and how we establish a coordinated access system. That will include things like governance, prioritization, how people access the system, how we refer people out of the system, all of the things that really shape and make strong the coordinated access system. By March, we should have our governance established, and we would be beginning to plan a registry week. That could happen anytime between really January and March, but I decided to place it smack dab in March so that we know that it is going to be coming. In May, we'll be doing the soft launch of the system. So after all of the planning has been done, that's when the system will actually hit the streets and we'll be able to move forward with documenting our folks. In July, we'll develop some of the guides. So the guides will be able to procure staff. It'll be a reference point for agencies that are involved in the coordinated access system to be able to look at how the system will work and just to move forward and ensure that we are all understanding decision making and how that happens so that we can deal with conflict when it happens. In September, we're hoping to have our staff hired and ready to hit the streets. And by October, you'll be well on your way with a beautiful coordinated access system. Now, I know that that sounds really like optimistic, but and it's a timeline and timelines can shift, but this is the goal that we're working towards. By next October, we are hoping to have a live system on the ground that will give us accurate and complete data about what's going on in our community and inform our programs and decisions and how we move forward in ensuring that people have access to housing and resources within our community. So we're moving along quite quickly. I thought I would talk much longer than I have, but clearly I'm nervous. And so I'm just banging through it because, you know, I can only see a few faces. But I'm going to go ahead and just move straight along and introduce Nelson. Look at this fantastic picture of Nelson. Isn't he just great? He joined the town of Bridgewater as a junior planner and as part of the Energized Bridgewater team. He supports the development of policies to address energy poverty and community services and affordable housing in Bridgewater. He's interested in working towards community-based solutions that reduce home energy costs, contributing to housing insecurity, and leads the town's work on coordinated access. And a little known fact about Nelson, he speaks a language that's only spoken in Northwest Switzerland. So I don't know what that language is. Maybe we'll get to hear a little bit of it today. I'm not sure, but I think it's quite interesting that we have two individuals here who can speak a language that only a certain number of people can speak. So maybe Nelson will tell us a little bit more about that. I'm not sure, but I'm pleased to give the screen over to him and yeah, and he can take it forward with talking about Energized Bridgewater.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm wearing the same sweater as I am in the picture of myself in my bio, so it is indeed me. Yeah, and then so yeah, Lisa asked me to come up with a random fact about myself, and I know I have kind of a strange accent, so there's I thought a good way to kind of clarify why I speak funny sometimes is that I grew up in Australia, and then I also spent a while in Switzerland, in Basel in particular, on a student exchange, where I learned a very guttural dialect of Swiss German. So yeah, I don't know how well I speak it now, but at one point it was my main form of communication. So yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Lisa. I'm Nelson. I'm a junior planner at the town of Bridgewater. So my background comes from urban planning, but I've been part of the Energized Bridgewater team. And as some of you may know, through some of our past engagement sessions, especially through the Hub network, the town has been building an energy poverty reduction program. And part of that program is looking at how coordinated access can be an entry point into our program to provide services for energy poverty reduction that range from improving housing stock to improving relationships between tenants and landlords. And so it's just going to be one program that sits within the coordinated access system. But yeah, the town is incredibly supportive of the work, and we're really happy to have Lisa on board to support the development of the system. So today I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on the Energize Bridgewater program and how we see ourselves fitting within the coordinated access system. I'm having a little bit of trouble moving on to the next screen. There we go. Okay. So this process of kind of building a coordinated access system has been a fairly long one. So in the Energy Poverty Research Program, which some of you were an essential part of, we found that there was really strong community support for a kind of system that would increase collaboration between community partners on a wide range of services and really help Bridgewater residents to navigate the existing programs and services that exist. There's so many great resources out there, and basically what we heard is that we want to increase access to those services. And so the concept of coordinated access became a big part of our Smart Cities Challenge pitch, which was essentially a $5 million grant that we bid for to implement our energy poverty reduction program. So we won that grant in 2019 and essentially secured funding to establish a coordinated access system as well as many other parts of our program. And so one of the first steps of that of the work included a system mapping report, which was really well done. It was done by Chris Hessian. And so from that, we got a system map, which is basically like a directory of all the services that exist in Bridgewater and surrounding area, and who provides them, criteria for accessing those services, that kind of thing. And then in around October, we awarded a contract to Lisa Ryan, who has such amazing experience in setting up coordinated access systems. And I just feel like he's really passionate and brings kind of great personality and knowledge to the work. So yeah, we're really happy to have you on board, Lisa.
Well, thank you, Nelson. That's very kind of you.
Of course. And so why is coordinated access so important for Bridgewater? Well, from the town's perspective, there's a number of symptoms in the community that housing is inaccessible, it's unaffordable, and so we think coordinated access is one of the ways to address that. So the rate of core housing need is growing. Bridgewater's housing stock is really old. It's very inefficient to heat, which puts a big cost burden on households, which is why the energy poverty rate is growing. In some of the research that we've done, we found that there's lots of discrimination by landlords against certain populations in our community. And there's a really high percentage of renters in Bridgewater, around 40% of the population rents, and there's a really low vacancy rate. So that's putting a lot of pressures on the housing market right now. And this was taken from Nancy Green, but COVID has just exacerbated a lot of the pressures that exist. So this is a great quote by Nancy. Say the Blazes home isn't possible if you don't have a home. And you're not able to self-isolate if you're couch surfing, and it's hard to practice social distancing if you're living in overcrowded housing. And so, while there has always been a lot of housing issues in Bridgewater, they're becoming even worse. And yeah, there's just another great quote here. So housing is key community infrastructure, and it's vital for personal and community health, among many other things. And so really the energy poverty reduction program that the town is currently working on is focused on reducing the energy poverty rate, but a lot of the program outcomes are very broad. They range from improved health to improved household income to improved service organization collaboration. And so our main goal is to reduce the energy poverty rate 20% by 2025. That's just a numerical target. In reality, it's about building kind of a whole social movement and social support infrastructure. And what the town is doing in particular is we want to support the upgrades of over 1,000 homes in Bridgewater while keeping them affordable. So entering into contracts with landlords and property owners that ensure that if they receive some of the incentives and services that we would provide to them to make home energy upgrades, they have to keep the rental rate of the unit affordable. We also want to construct 100 new affordable housing units, working with CMHC and Housing Nova Scotia. And realistically, the Energy Poverty Reduction Program is just one program or one resource that will be available to residents in the Coordinated Access System. So Coordinated Access is really focused on homelessness reduction, keeping track of who in the community is needing services, and the Energized Bridgewater program and the Energy Poverty Reduction Program is really just one service that residents will be connected to in a vast network of services. And so this is kind of how our program sits kind of around the Coordinated Access System. I won't go into too much detail, but these are kind of some of the other elements of our program that we're looking to support the home energy upgrades. And yeah, if you'd like to have a conversation with me at another time, I can go into detail on that. Some of our outcomes are for funding the Coordinated Access System include improving service delivery and efficiency and effectiveness, increasing resident income, improve residents' access to community services, and shifting community spending away from kind of those acute needs and to long-term solutions. And so, yeah, so the Coordinated Access System, I'd like to put emphasis on this. It'll be community owned. So Lisa's guiding the process of how all the governance structures are being set up. But essentially all those decisions will be community-based and community-made, especially for data access and sharing and kind of where that data resides. So I really want to emphasize that, while we're funding the system and providing some of the resources to do the work, we want the community to own this. And it has so much more scope than just our Energize program. It really functions for the entire community. And all the supports that are provided by organizations that are here today. So yeah, this is kind of the timeline. I know Lisa touched on it. This is like a 5-year timeline. So essentially, this year is all about getting the community process going, and then for our program, we would like to serve 50 households by 2021, and kind of increasing increments going forward. And so, yeah, we're basically providing full funding for the next 5 years of the program, which includes staffing and also some of the funding for the database setup for HIPAS and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's all I have today. I'm really excited to hear Jody speak. If you've got any questions, please email me. My email's here. You can also talk through Lisa. And yeah, thanks for having me today.
Thanks so much, Nelson. I just want to say, like, when you hear about the town doing that kind of stuff and being like so inclusive, it's rare. Like we don't hear about those things happening across the country quite a bit. Like having a town say, we want to invest and set up a system that benefits our folks that are living here that can't access certain resources. That's really groundbreaking, and I think it's important that we recognize that. That is really empowering to the agencies as well. And I don't know if you noticed on Nelson's graph, he had all those things, how the coordinated access system, where it sits in the program. But one of the things he had was the household navigator and the financial navigator, which I think is a really cool idea for communities, especially when we're looking at all of the funding opportunities that are available for housing development. To have somebody be able to help point us in the right direction, that's really powerful. So thank you, Nelson, for that. I'm just really excited to be part of something like this. Like I said, it's not common. And so I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I'm going to go back to the presentation here that I had, and I'm going to introduce Jody. Jody has an impressive portfolio. She's the coordinated access trainer. She's with the Training and Technical Assistance Program through the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. She's got 20 years experience in the nonprofit sector, working with vulnerable people in Canada, Latvia, and Sweden. Her work with marginalized and homeless youth and adults spans from Eastern Europe to Vancouver's downtown east side, and most recently in Victoria, BC. She has a background in social work, nonprofit leadership, and adult education. She recently relocated from Vancouver Island to Halifax with her daughter and husband. And again, another secret language. She speaks a language just only over 2 million people in the world would speak. So I'm also curious because I'm not sure what the language is. And we didn't get to hear a sample of Nelson's. I don't know. Maybe Jody will tell us what language she speaks as well, because I find that's actually quite interesting to hear how people pick up different languages. So Jody, I'm going to pass it right over to you.
All right, labdien visiem, man prieks būt šeit kopā ar jums. Es runāju latviski. I basically said, hello everybody, I'm happy to be here today with you, and the language I speak is Latvian. So,
that's beautiful.
When I first went to Latvia and embarked on learning that language, Nolan can, or Nelson, I'm so sorry. Nelson will agree with me. Learning the most obscure languages in the world is not very handy in the rest of our environment. So it's not very useful to speak Latvian in Canada. I don't come across it very often, and it gets rusty very quickly, but it's great for parties. And at one time I thought and operated solely in Latvian, so that was fun. I want to thank Lisa for having me here today. When she embarked on this process, she contacted the CAEH and the Training and Technical Assistance Program to ask if we could do some consulting for her as she implements this process with you in Bridgewater. And because I'm in Halifax, my boss said, yeah, Jody would love to do that. And in fact, I would love to do this because my job in the rest of the country is to work with communities across Canada to implement coordinated access systems. And so I have a bit of a weird interest in this. It's what geeks me out, and I'm happy to be here and talk to you about it. And it's a little bit unique because one of the things that's really exciting about what Bridgewater is doing is that you're setting out and doing this on your own. And that doesn't necessarily happen in other communities across the country. There are reasons, funding reasons from the federal government that this is happening. There are requirements that it happens, and you guys are ahead of the pack on that. So just a little bit of a whoop whoop for Bridgewater on this one, because it's exciting. It's not without its challenges, and it's a sort of gritty uphill path, but amazing. So good on you for doing it. I am going to share my screen now and pull up my presentation. Just give me 2 seconds here. All right. And I will probably go back and forth between looking over at something that you guys are like, why are you looking away from me? But that's just the way it is with 2 screens and online stuff. And if COVID were not the reality for us right now, I'd be in person with you, because it would have been a great drive down to Bridgewater today from Halifax. But such as it is, here I am. So thank you for having me. And I think I already did this part. Just a little bit about Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. If you are not aware of who we are a national organization sort of leading the charge to end homelessness and work with communities across the country who want to do the same thing. We have a fundamental belief that ending homelessness is possible. And we're willing to fail forward and do everything we can and try everything we can to find ways to make that happen. There's sort of 5 main arms of our organization. If you're not aware of us, the first is the National Conference on Ending Homelessness. If anybody has been to the National Conference, it is amazing. Lisa, you've been there, haven't you? It is picture 1,500 to 2,000 of your best friends who are also interested in homelessness, all getting together and talking about strategy. And it's a lot of fun. We were supposed to have a conference in Toronto right about now. Just probably would have been ending. I think it was November 21st. So boo COVID. I will boo COVID several times probably through this presentation, but boo COVID, we didn't have our conference this year. We are hoping that November 3rd to 5th next year, we will be able to gather together. So cross our fingers. Built for Zero Canada is also part of the national or Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. Lisa, I think, has told you a bit about Built for Zero and the work that they do. I am part of the Training and Technical Assistance Program. There are a handful of us who go across the country and train and talk to folks about different strategies and different things that we want to see collectively as a country for processes to end homelessness. The Allied Networks are a group of networks that we work with to share our common goal of ending homelessness. The Canadian Shelter Transformation Network, the National Alliance to End Rural and Remote Homelessness, the CNH3, which is the Canadian Network for the Health and Housing of People Experiencing Homelessness. CNH3, by the way, is a great place. If you go to their website, cnh3.ca, they have a lot of COVID-related resources for people who are working with homelessness right now in this time. And our last area that we work in is advocacy. So right now we have a campaign called Recovery for All, which is happening. And we're just basically saying, if we can step up and do all of the amazing things that we're doing during a pandemic, we can continue to step up and end homelessness. So a very real belief of that. And as I said, the training and technical assistance, our mission is to help communities and organizations working with homelessness and provide expert training. I'm always kind of uncomfortable to say that. All right, so actually I'm gonna go back just really quickly and a little bit about me. Lisa already said it all. I've worked in this field for a number of years. I have a particular interest in homelessness. And I've worked with adults, with youth. I've extensive experience working with mental health and addictions, and I've had an interesting opportunity to work both in Canada and in Eastern Europe and Sweden to see the differences between the way folks who are vulnerable are treated and the services and programs that are put in place for them. So most recently, a year ago, I came to Nova Scotia. Y'all are right. If you marry a Haligonian, he's gonna come home. That's just the way it is. And so here I am, and I have had a great opportunity to learn more about Nova Scotia and get to know the services here, particularly with coordinated access. I'm also working with Halifax and Cape Breton and Bathurst and Fredericton and PEI. So on this side of the country, I have a really good sense of who is doing what with respect to coordinated access. I also work with communities across the country all the way to Saskatchewan and have experience working in coordinated access in Victoria as well. My coworkers took Western Canada, I think out of spite so that I can't get home, but it doesn't matter right now anyway, because I'm not going there. So they're fine. They can have it online. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm happy to be here, and I'm learning about the East Coast, but arriving just before a pandemic is probably not the best time to move to a new part of the world. So that's enough about me. I'd like to just invite you all to unmute in a second and think about this. So I want you to just sort of imagine, just be part of this with me. You're out and about one day, you're running errands, you're doing whatever, and you meet someone who's new to Bridgewater. Maybe it's me, maybe it's Lisa, maybe it's someone who's completely new, a tourist on the street. And you have about 5 minutes to chat with them. They ask you to tell them about homelessness in Bridgewater, to explain the system by which individuals experiencing homelessness access housing and supports in the community. And I want you to tell me, maybe unmute yourself, be brave, get out there. What would you tell them about homelessness in Bridgewater and how people access services? Everybody's looking down. Nobody wants to answer the question.
I'll go first. I'm in Queens County, so I'm just going to use that as an example. But up until 2 years ago, I probably couldn't have told you much about it. I had a couple of instances that I'd heard stories and understood that it existed in the town. You don't see it in Queens County, but you definitely, I've heard, but this year, in the last year, I've heard more and more stories about it, and actually had the experience of dealing directly with somebody who became homeless, and did what I could to help him. There were a few people in the community that were helping this person, but there are a number of people in the community that we put him in touch with, and one of them was through social services, to help him in any way he could. Plus, we got in touch with the MLA, we got in touch with services in Bridgewater, because that's the main thing. We don't have direct services for housing here, but we know that there's services in Bridgewater that cover Queens County as well. We also have, there's someone else on this call today, Cherry Workman. We're both on a committee that has a number of people on it, and we share that information when we know that somebody needs help. We share it with that email group to see who could come forward with services or help the person in any way that they need help. We also have a senior safety coordinator who as well has a lot of access to resources. So those are some of the things we did for that person. And those are the things that I know right now. And there's a few others as well, depending on the situation. But at least I know now that how we are connected, and through the group that we belong to, we are trying to get more connected. And we've basically done the beginnings of what you've already done with the mapping, trying to figure out what services we have here, what services we have access to, in helping people, whether it's homelessness or anything else in the community. But most of those things are all connected. Most of those other services are all connected to people being homeless as well. So we're on a good start, but I think that we have the ability to help, but we wish it was more of a coordinated access system, more coordination, so that we can help people more quickly. And it's not about, okay, get together and how can we help somebody, and who knows what or whatever. We would love to just go to either a person or this system or whatever, a website or something like that, that we can just say, okay, this is what we need, and there's the contact for all these people that need to jump into action to help that person. So that's where we're at now. But it was somewhat daunting in the first place to know that the helplessness of trying to help that person, and no matter what we did and how many people were there to help, there was absolutely sort of nothing that we could do. It was waiting and getting him in touch with the right people to finally get him the help that he needed, which it worked out really, really good in the end. And I think that was a lot because of the close-knit community and helping kind of community that we are down here. So.
Thank you, Heather. Anybody else want to speak to this?
Just to follow up, so I'm Barbara Ross. I'm on the health board in Queens, and one of the presentations that we had for a podcast was interviewing somebody from 211, and what we discovered is, 211 doesn't just tell you where to find a class in pottery. What I was very impressed about is the very question that you've just asked. It's quite amazing how these advocates, or the people who are at the other end of the phone on 211, who have all those contacts, all those resources at their fingertips, and have been able to put all that together and kind of present that package fairly quickly. Yeah, so they didn't use that scenario. They used domestic violence scenario, and it was incredible how versatile, how you know, how comprehensive their approach was to that problem. So, you know, I just wanted to remind people that that resource is there and probably quite underutilized.
Barbara, it's absolutely true. I'm amazed at the work that 211 does in Nova Scotia. My husband works for Feed Nova Scotia, and so anybody who is dealing with food insecurity in the province can call can call 211 to get food box program access, and it's a great way to sort of connect people as well. Anybody else have anything that they would be able to tell someone if they wanted to know more about homelessness in Bridgewater?
My name
Hi.
is,
Oh,
I'm with Schools Plus. Sorry, Chris.
that's okay.
We support students and their families. And so pre-COVID, I would say that we would have, if it was a female identified person, we would have possibly used our women's shelter, because lots of times they would have left their place of residence due to some kind of violence. Now our Harbor House shelter is full. We also would have referred to the homeless program through Freeman, the housing program through Freeman House, but that's at capacity right now as well. And so for youth, we are looking at, and adults, couch surfing. I would say homelessness looks like people living in campers right now. It is people living in crowded quarters with other family members as much as possible if they have those supports locally. We would send some youth to shelters in Yarmouth or Halifax. But right now, I wouldn't feel like we have a lot to offer people who are homeless. Everything is at capacity. I'm telling people who face potential homelessness to do whatever it takes to keep their current housing, because there might not be anything out there for them.
That is so true. And I can't see who just said that.
That was Linda.
Linda, thank you, Linda, for that. So true what you're saying, and I think that that's those are realities across the board in communities that I talk to everywhere. It's really difficult. I think one of the things that you mentioned there that really speaks to me in terms of smaller communities is having to send folks away for shelter, and especially youth. That hurts my heart to, you know, think about sending kids to Yarmouth or Halifax rather than having them stay in the community, but that's where things are at. So is there anybody else that was going to say anything? I think, Chris, you were going to say something.
Hi, yes. When you have 5 to 10 minutes to chat with one person about homelessness, depending on where they're coming from, might be a good indicator of what you can suggest or what you can bring forward. Because often people are so overwhelmed by all that they've experienced, and it's a really scary experience. So it would depend on what perspective the person has and what their needs are at the time. We do have a lot of really great resources and resource people in Lunenburg County. I serve all of Lunenburg County as senior safety coordinator. So there are a lot of great people out there. They have a piece to the puzzle, but it can be overwhelming for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely correct. It's a big system. And there's a lot of pieces to it, a lot of people doing great work, but I think that, as Heather said, sometimes pulling the pieces together and finding the way forward is challenging. So let's talk about coordinated access. It's a way for communities to design and streamline or bring consistency to the process of housing or providing housing and services to people who are experiencing homelessness. Without it, I think a lot of the things that people were talking about come up. You have to navigate a complicated web of connected but uncoordinated services. So you're going from this place to this place to this place to this place. You're telling your story multiple times. And that is not positive for somebody who's experiencing trauma. We know that having to tell your story multiple times is problematic, is hurtful, is harmful. And as a result of it, sometimes people are mismatched with services in their community, or they're matched with the best possible thing, but it's not quite right. People are in the system, they're trying to find access to services, and they end up being circling around in the system for longer than they might, because there isn't a coordinated effort to help. I think that it's really important to remember that the longer someone is in the system, the harder it is to get them out of it. And so really, when we're not coordinating our efforts and when we're not working together to provide responses for people, we're not doing ourselves any favors. The costs of our services grow exponentially. We may have one person accessing 5 different programs, receiving similar services from all 5 of them, and that's not efficient, but it's also not really effective for that person. So I think that one of the real benefits of coordinated access is getting together, sharing information, ensuring that if I'm doing one thing with a person, that agencies X, Y, and Z are not also doing the exact same things, and that we're able to get people out of the system faster. I think back to working in the downtown east side with a young person who was 19 at the time. I will call him Q. And he came in as a fresh-faced boy, and he did not leave as a fresh-faced boy because we could not find the services that we needed to get him out quickly enough. I was lucky enough with another young person to get him in and out in about 2 weeks. And that person came back to us with a happy story and a happy ending. We really do know that the longer people are in the system, the less chance it is of us finding ways to move them beyond that system. So it is important. Hang on. Navigating 2 screens. Coordinated access is something that communities across the country are talking about right now. And I was so excited when Lisa got in touch with TTA to see if we could do some consulting with to support the work that she's doing. And her expertise in Moncton is something that's really going to stand in your favor because she has a sense of what's happening. Moncton is part of Built for Zero. They have a very successful program. They are doing some amazing things. And so it's great to have this opportunity to work with Lisa and support the work that she's doing. And when we're thinking about coordinated access and the work that's happening across the country, it's so amazing to see chronic homelessness being reduced, just homelessness overall being reduced in communities. We are reducing the number of people, what we call inflow into the community, and we are reducing the number of people who are coming back. So when we're looking at homelessness as a whole, we tend to think of, in my world, we tend to think of inflow and outflow. And we want inflow and outflow we want outflow to increase, but we also want that to not become inflow again. And I know that a number of people who work in homelessness can attest to the fact that very often we mismatch people with resources because we just want to get them the heck out of the problem. And we put them into a resource that doesn't fit their needs or isn't appropriate for them. And essentially we see them back on our doorstep. And so we are not doing anything to stem the tide. We are just circulating people. And so this process hopefully works to match people more effectively to resources in the community and reduce the number of people who are coming back in. And as we keep track of the number of people who are coming in and the number of people housed, we have a better sense of what it is that we need to do in our community to address these things.
Jody,
Yeah.
what you just said, I just wanted to jump in because it really resonated with me about like, we're focusing on, of course, outflow, but ensuring that outflow doesn't turn back into inflow. And it's interesting because I was scrolling Facebook this morning, while I'm eating my breakfast, as everybody knows, I'm sure. Yes, one does. And there was this article that a landlord had posted. The unit was like, it was a picture. The unit was completely destroyed. And they were talking about, this is why we don't house whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I was looking at it and thinking, like, this situation would have been so different had the person been matched to the proper housing resource, had they been connected to supports, like a support system. But also I was thinking, like, of course, for the person, but then I was thinking about the damage that has done to other folks looking for housing and how that ends up really, I guess, justifying rental increases and discriminatory practices in housing, and why some property owners will not take people who, even though they're legally supposed to, won't take people that come with social assistance attached to them. And so it just, I guess, as I was kind of mentally preparing for today, it kind of put that fire back in me again, about how important it is, like what you're talking about, matching people properly and ensuring they don't circle back into the system. Because every time somebody circles back, it impacts the rest of the people that we have waiting to be matched to a resource, not just that individual. So it does impact our communities. Anyways, yeah. I just wanted to throw that out there because it really spoke to me.
Oh, there's so many things in that. And I think about that. We'll come to, or maybe we will, or maybe we won't, or maybe we'll in a future conversation. But, when you are a housing service provider and you are dealing with $5,000, $10,000 worth of damage in a unit, it is a hard sell to allow a system to put people in for you. But one of the things about this is that a counter argument to that is a system where you are one piece of that puzzle allows you to do what you do best. And if you're not having to provide all of those other things and be everything to someone, you can focus on the parts of that system that you're really good at. And you can tie people into the services that they need. And so if that person, the person who made the $10,000 damage had a case manager or supports, and part of that case conferencing was about identifying what that person is going to need when they go into housing and putting that in place for them. And that case manager could be providing those supports rather than constantly having to connect with landlords or doing the housing search. There's so many ways to streamline that are part of this. I see things happening in the chat, but I can't really look at them. So I don't know, Lisa, if it comes up and there's something that I need to address, feel free.
Yeah, I'm monitoring it. So if there's questions, I'll let you know.
Great. So when we talk about a coordinated access system, I want to talk about a couple of different things. And I don't want to get into too many specifics because I think that this is something that Lisa's going to work with you on as we move down the road, but she's going to be talking about a by name list. A by name list is that real-time list of all the people in your community that are experiencing homelessness. One of the things that's neat about coordinated access is that in a coordinated access system, we know people by name. And I don't want to underestimate that. Knowing someone by name or being known by name matters. Being seen as a person matters. And so often in systems, we work with homeless person. Hey, buddy. And as a collective, so individual outreach workers know that person by name, they know all of that. But as a collective in a system, we couldn't tell you what buddy's name is. We couldn't tell you how many buddies there are. We could just tell you that that shelter served 10,000 bed nights. or 60 women. But in terms of how many times Buddy was in the shelter, systems sometimes don't have the ability to do that, or they just haven't been able to streamline to the point where they can do that. Now, if your system is doing that, kudos to you. Keep on doing that. But a real-time list of all people experiencing homelessness does a few things. It allows you to identify someone as soon as they come into your system. When you identify a person from the first day they're there, you can get them out as quick as possible. You've identified Q and you've said, we got to get Q out of here. And that would have done great things for him. It also identifies how long that particular individual's been in your system. Which points to system level problems. If you have a glut of people in your system who've been there for a very long time, you need to start assessing why. And a common thing in every community is we don't have housing. We don't have housing. And so I will talk to communities across the country and they'll say, we've got a really specific situation. We're kind of unique. We've got this many this many people in our system and we don't have anywhere to house them. And I have to sort of shake my head and say, yeah, you're right. And that's the system across the country. But when we're looking at a by name list, we know who's on the list. We also know who left. We know we can time from the time we met them the very first time and we put a name to them to the time we housed them. And that information is really important to funders. It's really important to service agencies. It's really important to the public. When they're clamoring on your door saying, deal with the person who's in my alcove at my shop, there are a lot of really interesting data points that you can talk to the community about in terms of raising funds, raising awareness, raising kindness. If there's nowhere to put people, because there is no housing, and that person in the alcove is not the only person who's been there for 65 days, these are the conversations you can be having at the community level to come up with solutions. And it's important to know in the work that I'm doing across the country, when I talk to communities, I talk to communities from that community perspective to every single community, because what's happening in Bridgewater is different than what's happening in Cape Breton, is different than Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. Your story is unique, and what's happening in your community is unique because of your community and who lives there, and the history and the makeup and its industry and all of those different things. So this by name list for you is going to be very different than the by name list for someone else, and it's going to tell you different information. It's going to tell you information at the household level. What do I need for that person and their service prioritization? And it's also going to tell us about that inflow, outflow, and how many people are actively homeless in our community. So when you get that number of 452 active homeless people in your community, and I hope Bridgewater doesn't have that number. That's just a number I pulled out of my head, which is a high number. 452 active people in your community. As you monitor that number in real time, you can set expectations that that number is going to go down, and you can see how it went down. As you try new programs in your community, you tweak something, you decide we're going to do a drop-in center and we're going to do this, this, and this. That month and the following next 3 months, you can see, did that impact anything? So many times we start new programs and we implement them, we run them, and then we say, I think it made a difference, or it made a difference, but we don't have the numbers and the data to actually back that up. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're shifting program delivery on hunches. And so it's really important to be able to use this, and it's actionable data that helps us to triage those services. It's performance evaluation. Like I said, it's the policy changes. So I'm going to talk more about that by name list stuff as we go along, but also a strong coordinated access system is based on Housing First. And for the people who are aware of Housing First, that makes sense. Housing First is a philosophy that basically says we do not need to put preconditions to people's housing. Housing is a human right. That's my wording, but housing is a human right. House people and then do the things that they need to make the changes in their lives. I cannot make the changes in my life if I have no shelter, if I don't have a lock on my door, if I don't have a sense of safety, and I shouldn't have to earn that. And so there's a lot more around that in terms of recovery orientation, pieces around social integration and how we build community around people who are experiencing housing and homelessness. But at the core of coordinated access needs to be a belief that people should be housed and that they don't need to jump through hoops to earn that. And I cannot say that enough. And it's a standardized and coordinated process that should make it easier for everyone. Again, back to that by name list thing. How are we using that information? So at a systems level, we understand that real-time picture of what's happening for homelessness in our community. We understand that inflow and that outflow. We can provide data to anybody who needs it for that advocacy. If we're getting a phone call from the media, we can answer, yes, this is what's going on in our community. But if we also need it for funding, or if we need, if you've got 35 people in your community that are homeless and you have 16 housing units, there's a case for funding. Easy peasy, boom. There it is, right? There's not much else that has to go into the work for that. And it's amazing how quick you can access that data. Coordination of all the providers, and you can set targets to reach functional zero. Functional zero is possible. And I think Lisa is going to be talking more about functional zero as you move on. Again, at that client level, being known by name is so important. And as you're referring clients to services, that you're efficiently referring them. You're not making them run around in circles. You know where you've sent them, you know why you've sent them there, you know who's doing what. And I often talk to people about that circle of no's. So when I start my day as a homeless person and I go to agency A and I wait in line, and then I go to agency B and I wait another hour in line. And then I go to agency C and I wait another hour in line. And inevitably I go to the income assistance office as the last point of my day, and I've run out of time. And I blow my top and I lose my cool and I get angry and I get barred from whatever service it is. And the staff have a right to safety, but there is this real bumping up of heads between safety and what's absolutely understandable given the circumstances. And so I think as people who have privilege in our community, we get a pass when we lose our cool in the bank. But if I look homeless and I lose my cool in an agency or in an establishment, I don't have that same leniency. There is that zero tolerance. There's zero tolerance for abuse. And I would gently put to a lot of people, what does abuse mean? And who's being abused? So, coordinated access allows us to streamline services so that we can really approach things from a client-centered process, and so that we can be really gentle to people in terms of how we're treating them. It's also a no side door policy. So one of the things that I think makes people nervous is this piece, especially in small towns. If you know everybody in the community and you are a worker and you can just go and have a conversation with the landlord because you know a space is coming available and you can talk them into taking your client, and you're really good at that, this could make you a little bit nervous. But the flip side of it is that a coordinated access system prioritizes the people in the community that need the housing most. And so this is a fair system. And it's not about how good you are at advocating, it's about the need of the people in the system. And so the sooner that we can get the most vulnerable people into housing, the expenditures go down, the pressures on the system go down, everything alleviates in what am I trying to say? It's a bit of a staircase.
Cost,
Yeah, yeah,
stress, resource draining.
all of it, right? Yeah, I can see some nodding. I can see people who are watching who are nodding. You know what I'm talking about, right? And it's a cascade. It's also clear, it's consistent, the policies are across the board. Staff are all trained the same way. So if I am in agency X or agency Y or agency B or agency A, I understand the system in the same way and the process in the same way as the other agencies. And I'm doing things in the same way, I'm treating the client in the same way. And I'm able to take that data and I'm able to make decisions based on evidence rather than on hunch. So when I change my program, I can change it based on that evidence, and I can monitor how that change is impacting what's happening. Nelson talked about service mapping, and you've done that, which is an amazing thing. I know that in March, you guys are going to be doing a registry week. It's so important to have those two pieces of the puzzle. If you don't know what all the others do, who does what, and what do they do well, and let them do it. You don't have to, no agency has to be the be all and end all for everybody. And if someone else is doing it, let them do it. It's amazing in systems mapping that I've done in different communities where everybody gets together and talks about, okay, so you work for the Salvation Army, you work for the food bank, you work for here. And we would get people to take sticky notes and walk around the room and write a sticky note about what they know about the other agencies. And then we would get those agencies to stand by the sticky notes and tell us whether or not they were accurate. And I'm just here to tell you that sometimes we operate on myths. There were a lot of agencies who would be like, well, we haven't done that in 15 years, or no, we don't bar people for that, or this is something that somebody talks about that we do, but we actually don't do it. And so when you can get everybody in the room and actually dispel some of those myths and really operate on an understanding of what people truly do, it can be a bit transformational. And then the registry week that you're going to do, you cannot effectively serve your homeless community if you don't know how many homeless people you're serving. Period. So knowing that number and being able to dig into it from day one with the data to say, this is what this is our problem. And this is how we're going to deal with it. And fast forward to May or October or next November to say, did what we're doing make a difference? And if it has, great, we keep doing what we're doing. And if it hasn't, what changes do we need to make to actually see the effect we want? The nice thing about this is that it gives you data over time, so you can see a change. And I've worked in so many systems where there is no data over time. There's a number of participants, but there's always a number of participants. There's always someone clamoring at the door. And unless you actually know who they are and you have the numbers and you can measure that, and then even if you're not doing it at the system level, one agency does really well at keeping their data, but are they serving the same people as all the other agencies? Is it the same folks or is it different folks? This allows you to understand that.
Jody, could I just ask a question?
Yeah.
And it's probably, I think maybe Lisa's probably going to talk about it later, but the same thing keeps coming up in my mind as you talk. When we talk about homeless, we're including those people that are either living on the streets or have nothing, or but you say the couch surfing people as well. Are we talking about you're homeless if you're living with other people and it's overcrowded? And we're talking about homelessness is in people that are in unsafe housing or in housing that doesn't suit them. So this is all part of homelessness, right? Those are the named people. Those would be on our named list. People that are in unsuitable housing and people that are living with other people that shouldn't be, and that sort of thing. So we're including all of that.
So if I'm in housing that I can't guarantee myself, that I have no control over, that I could be asked to leave at any time because someone else has the lease for it, it's not my house.
Okay.
If I am couch surfing and I'm living there day by day until someone tells me I'm no longer welcome, I am homeless.
Right.
You know, I don't have my own place. If I don't have a door with a lock that I can lock and no one else is going to tell me that I can't lock it for my own safety, and that I may be violated as a result of that, I'm homeless.
Okay. But does that include those people that are living in housing that they don't want to be living in, but there's nothing else for them to be living in? Are we considering those people that need, I mean, maybe they would fall lower down on the list because they actually have a place, but it's not suitable housing for them?
Lisa, maybe you want to speak to that within the context of this process.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking more about defining homelessness in our January sessions when we start doing our strategic planning. So some of those questions will be answered, and we'll be looking at we're going to be using the definitions that Reaching Home has put out. So that's the federal government who gave specific definitions on what is and isn't homelessness. What I can do is I can actually send out those to everyone that we've adopted in our planning. And then as we look at our community, we'll be able to determine who fits that criteria. So I know in my work in Moncton, one of the things that we want to include, so let me just go back. When we had the by name list in Moncton, we were able to identify that at one point in time, there were more women who were experiencing homelessness than males. And what we realized was the domestic violence shelter in the city was full, and the rest of the shelters were not safe for these women to be able to stay. So the number of women who were sleeping rough dramatically increased throughout spring and summer. With that information, we, with some of the domestic violence shelters, with the women's programs, started discussing how do we impact the inflow of women that are coming into homelessness. And one of the things, that is pretty well known is that women tend to couch surf. They will stay in places that maybe their name is not on leases, et cetera. And so they're harder to identify than people who are visibly experiencing homelessness or staying in shelters. So we took the definition and we looked strategically at it. While couch surfing is harder in like point in time counts, they don't necessarily count as being absolutely homeless. We determined that through our system we would. And so a woman who was experiencing homelessness, who was couch surfing in an unsafe environment, perhaps staying with an abusive partner or ex, or living in a unit that one person had the lease and there was 10 people living there. We decided that she, in her situation, would be prioritized the same as a male who was sleeping rough outside. They would be the same priority level when we were looking at like resources and moving people to housing. So as we do our work through January and moving forward in the new year, as we look at mapping out how we're going to do our prioritization, how we're going to define things, these are conversations we'll have. Why I asked each and every one of you to bring your whole selves to this, because you're going to have experiences from your own personal life. I have my own personal experience with homelessness as a woman, so I understand where that links. But other individuals will have experiences with people that they work with, et cetera. But again, we're going to get more into that in January. And so I'm going to let Jody finish and then we can get to the discussion time. But thank you so much, Heather. I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's something that is going to be very important for us to cover immediately in January.
Thank you.
Of course.
I think that really segues into some of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm going to breeze through a lot of these slides because it is that general overview, but it helps. But this is all about that conversation to understand where is communication and collaboration strong, and where are things breaking down, and how can we adjust the system to serve the needs of the people that we are serving. So the next piece is governance. This is a piece that you are going to be working on with Lisa. Every coordinated access system needs to have a governing body, a lead agency, someone who is going to do that work. There are oftentimes there's a lead organization and oversight committees and working groups. So just having that that structure, building an appropriate governance model that's going to exercise proper leadership for planning and implementation and the ongoing management of this. So I know that Lisa outlined that in her piece. It's just also to have, as you do that, we always strongly recommend consultations at the community level to see where that all lands, and to understand what needs to be in place for there to be effective monitoring and leading of this process while maximizing trust. Who needs to be at the table for you to feel secure that things are being dealt with in the way that they need to be dealt with? And I think that, having service providers involved, having Indigenous service providers involved, having people of African, Nova Scotian descent at the table, people with lived experience, as well as government, and the town is so important. Having subject matter experts at the table and people that are going to be there to support the change in what's happening and build political will, and make this move forward, because it is a momentum building piece. There's a huge piece around privacy and security, a massive part of this, because people get really weirded out about sharing their information. People will say, I can't share my client information with anyone else outside of my agency. And this is a piece that needs to be in place and worked through and discussed. And I think that there are ways to do it. I can tell you that there are communities across the country that are sharing data effectively and with privacy at the pinnacle of what they're taking into consideration. But one of the things that I often hear from communities, or I will hear from agencies, is I can't send my person to agency X because they don't trust them. I can't send my person to agency Y because they don't do this, or my client doesn't trust this. And what I will challenge them to ask is it the client that doesn't trust, or is it you that don't trust? And if you can't lead by example and by your relationships and by the integrity that you have in and your trust in the system, then you have no hope of ever building that trust with your clients. So, leading off those conversations to say, hey, like it sounds like after everything you've told me, you need this type of support. And I know Lisa, and Lisa works at agency Y, and I'm going to give her a call and I'm going to introduce you to her. Go on down there, talk to her. She's going to provide you with X, Y, Z, and I'm going to follow up. And I'm going to follow you through this process, but I trust Lisa to do her part of this. If you're protecting your clients and saying they don't trust, they won't go to agency Y, I think there's a little bit of you in there as well. And so building those conversations, if there is something about that trust that needs to be address it now, build those relationships with your partners, build that relationship within the system so that you can pass that trust to the community that you are serving. And I think that's a really big piece of this. Access points can be virtual or physical. And I know that Lisa's going to talk about this a lot as time goes on. I think a piece that I want to talk about right now is just creating an idea that there is no wrong door that a person can walk through to get service. But in our COVID world, finding ways to adjust it so that there are ways for people to safely access services within a coordinated access system that will keep you and them safe. Not every person who is homeless wants to go to a shelter for service. So making sure that access points are not only in shelters, they are in libraries, they are in schools. If you're setting up an access point for youth and you're doing it during school hours and it's not near the school, how can you expect them to get to it? If you are setting up access points for women who are fleeing domestic violence, can you do something that protects their safety? You wouldn't be putting up a sign that says, hey, here we are. Maybe you're doing something online. Maybe you're setting up a chat line. Maybe you're setting up something like that for the first piece. But finding a variety of ways. And especially when you're dealing with large geographic areas, doing some virtual pieces as well, a hotline, a virtual chat line, those types of things are really, really valuable. I would be remiss to not mention diversion and prevention. Don't bring someone into the system if they don't need to be here. Again, that whole piece, remembering back to Q, he should not have been in a shelter. His outcomes in life would have been very different had someone said to him, is there anybody, is there anywhere that you can go other than here? Is there something we can do to save you from being evicted? There are funds, there are pools of money, pots of money in communities. Is there something we can do? And I know that Energize Bridgewater is talking about emergency funding type things that might be available to folks so that they're not losing their housing as a result of something like this. So screening people and looking at every other option other than bringing them into the system before you do is number one. Assessment. At the point that you're doing a coordinated access system, you're assessing people with a common assessment tool, which is amazing because then everybody is speaking the same language. It is standardized. It is written in the same way. Every agency understands the same information. All the agencies that are doing this assessment are trained in the exact same way. There is consistency to this, which is beautiful. And it's evidence-based. And so you can identify the acuity of an individual and understand what I'm talking about, what Lisa's talking about, and what Nelson's talking about from the same set, the same language. And so that's so important. Sometimes you will, in our current way of doing things, you talk to the shelter and they're like, oh my gosh, that person is a train wreck. He is barred from this place. You go to the other place where you've got a worker who's really reached that person and they're like, he's a pussycat. So how do you bridge the gap between those two stories? You do that by having a common language, a common framework from which to judge that information. And then prioritization. Lisa's talked about having a prioritization matrix, sitting down as a community and identifying what is it about this area of the world that makes homelessness specific? Who are the people we are serving? Do we have, across Canada, there is a very high incidence of Indigenous folks who are homeless. I was listening to CBC this morning and they were talking about LGBTQ2S plus folks who are seniors who are facing housing needs because between 1943 and 1954, when they could have come out, they were too afraid to do so. And so now they are going into homes and they've never been out. And they don't feel safe to be out. And so there's a piece of their entire lives where they can't actually be safe. Those are pieces. I worked in the downtown east side with the little itty bitty women, elderly women who are 80 years old, whose husbands had all their lives managed all the finances. They thought they were fine until he was gone. And then they realized they were not fine and they hadn't been fine for a very long time. And then she was homeless. She didn't have the heart to tell her daughter who would have helped her, but she couldn't because she just couldn't. The shame of being in the place where she was, protecting her husband, and she didn't want, Ethel did not want her daughter to know that daddy had mismanaged the money. And so she's in a shelter with people who are severely addicted and dealing with mental health problems. She had never seen a day of that in her life. So there are increasing stories of seniors who are facing homelessness. Youth going to Yarmouth and Halifax. No, keep them at home, keep them in your community, please. How do they navigate that? How do they stay safe if they're in a town that they've never, ever been in and somebody tells them that they're going to help them? Coordinated access is not a first come, first serve system. It is a system that bases who gets service on their need and the intensity of supports that they require. And so I think it's beautiful to think that we can help the people who need the help the most first. And setting up that system and working through what that priority looks like in your community as a community is a first piece of that puzzle. And that's, you know, you're going to be thinking about that. What would be the priorities for you? What does homelessness look like for you? And as you set up that prioritization matrix and you say, this is how we will house people in the order that we will house them as they come into our system. As people come into the system, it's not, you're not housing someone because they're Johnny's friend's uncle's buddy. You're housing them because this is Mavis, who has these issues in her life, who cannot get a space any other way. So there's no side door, there's no back door, there's no deals. It is fair. And it is based on the fact that Mavis will change her life if you give her a chance. And she's not, maybe she's not the loudest, but she's the one in the most need. And finding, you know, once you've mapped out your system and you know what the services are available and you know how many housing units you have and you have a sense based on your conversations of how often they realistically come available and what we need to do to move forward and build our system and lobby for more funding and lobby for more units and all of that, we can put people into the best possible unit for their needs. I think some agencies get worried. They say, okay, so if I'm part of a coordinated access system and I have a housing unit, you're going to cram people down my throat that I don't want. Because I don't take those people, or I don't take people with mental health issues, or I don't take people who are not dry, or whatever the criteria in your system is, or in your agency. A coordinated access system takes into account the criteria of that unit. So as that person becomes available, if they're not suitable for your unit, you wouldn't be the place that was offered. However, in some agencies across the country, and I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, there is sometimes a history of not wanting to take the most difficult case because it's the most difficult case, right? And so if you're faced with this person who's going to be a pussycat and this person who is hell on wheels but really needs a break, you're going to pick the pussycat. Guess what? This person, their expenses, their costs, everything goes up in the system, and they're just doing this, right? And then you got the $10,000 bill when they finally do get a space that's not suited to them. So there are so many benefits in this matching and referral piece, and benefits for the client, but also benefits for the service provider, because you know that you're getting the right person for your program. And there are supports in place when you do the case conferencing. So as they're putting somebody into or suggesting somebody for your program, they're saying, okay, so Buddy's going to go into your program and they are going to require these supports to make that successful. How can we all do that together? So this kind of system allows for monitoring, adaptation, streamlining, its lasting change. By monitoring and working together, we are able to develop a system where we know what we need to do, and we can work together on how we are going to make it happen. It means that it's less work at the individual agency level because agencies are sharing that lift, and that's synergy. So if you're looking at this and you're thinking about synergy, the definition of synergy is right on the board here. The interaction of elements that when combined produce a total effect that is greater than the sum of the individual elements. So we're better when we work together. And we really are in this together, because it's not going to go away until we all dig in together. And I do believe ending homelessness is possible. But we need a strong, coordinated system to make that happen. And so, in the words of Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can, and go. So Lisa, I know
Jody.
I know you have other things. I have my poll at the end, but I don't know that I want to do it yet.
Okay.
I think you have some closing.
Well, the only thing I was going to open it up to was if there was any questions that anyone had. I know there was a lot of information there, and I also want to say, Jody, you're a rock star. Like, this was, I don't know if anyone else feels what I felt, but man, like, you sometimes get into your work and then you kind of lose that fire, but like, it just got ignited all over again. The passion. I also believe that housing is a human right, and that we deserve to be matching people to housing without them having to, earn it. We will work better together when we're working truly together. Like, I'm just totally excited about what's going to happen in the new year as we all kind of gather and get together and start this planning, and how it's going to impact the community, and how really this area of Nova Scotia is going to be embarking on a historical journey, because it's just not happening anywhere else. And this is exciting for all of us. It's exciting for the surrounding communities. It's exciting for the town of Bridgewater. It's exciting for every single agency that's here, and for all of the citizens that live and reside here. I'm really excited about where we're going with this. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I echo this because, as I said, I work with communities across the country, and some of them cold call us. Some of them are coming to us because the federal government has said, you need to make this happen. And there is a difference in the energy, no pun intended there. There is a difference in the vibe in the communities that are doing this, because they see it as an obligation, versus the ones that are coming and saying, hey, we're going to make this happen. 100%. Built for Zero talks about champions in your community and needing to have champions. And I would proffer that the people on this call are, hopefully some of the pioneering champions of the system. And that is what builds that momentum. So when you get off this call, if you're excited at all, telling other people what you heard, and starting to get that momentum going, because that's the only way forward.
And we'll have like I said, at the beginning, the presentation is recorded. So I will be sharing it with the people who had registered for it, as well as a few who couldn't make it. They had sent their regrets, but did want to be involved in this. So we'll be able to share this. And yeah, I'm really hoping that the momentum moves forward, even though we will be breaking around the holiday. But when we come back, we can do, another pump up session and get our hands dirty as we start planning. So right now, it is currently 11:03, and I want to just take maybe 15 or so minutes. If anyone have any kind of like pressing questions or comments, now's the time. Just unmute yourself, and if two people speak at once, you can rock, paper, scissors. Who gets to go first, if you want to, or however you want to make that choice. And then Jody did say she has a poll just to finalize things with, and I'll just do my final comments. So are there any questions? And you can also put something in the chat. If you do, I can read that out as well. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, it's Barbara here. I'm very glad to hear that you're going to use the housing first model. I've certainly had experience of that working in Calgary. I just wonder, when we talk about having all the players at the table, so if we identify that we have a client who has chronic homelessness, but also addiction issues, will addictions and mental health prioritize that client? Will they be able to put that client at the head of the queue, as it were, with regards to addiction support as part of that housing package?
So that, yes. No, I mean, it really depends on the community, right? And I've seen communities where I can think of a community in Manitoba right now that has galvanized everybody, and everybody's at the table, and they have said, yes, we will, for folks that require treatment services, and if they are on this list, we will get them into treatment services. We will do this, we will do that. And it really is a matter of this system working to negotiate those things. And so the answer to that question could be yes, and it might not be. But there is no way forward without having that conversation. And so I would say the best system is going to have that. And if you get a no right now, you keep bringing this data back and saying, this is what we're doing and this is what's working. And the only thing missing is you guys.
Yeah. And I think that was a good point, Jody, like being able to say that it might be a no for now, but as it grows and as we are able to show data and show that there is a need, that no can turn into a yes. And I personally have seen that happen. I've seen systems change, and it's been quite inspiring, especially when a lot of people will look at government and say, oh, it takes forever, and it does. It takes forever for policies to change. But I once there was a woman that worked in the government in New Brunswick that was quite an advocate for the work that we were doing, and she said, with government, everything is possible with government. It just takes time. And we kind of use that as our mandate when we talk to government, like anything's possible. It's just going to take some time sometimes. So yeah, I think it's very possible, Barbara. Thank you for that question.
I think the other piece of it, Barbara, is that as you're following people within a concrete coordinated access system with a by name list, as you've assessed people and you're following them, you have concrete data. So the difference between taking, having worked as a director in an organization and going to government and saying, I find that overwhelmingly this is what's going on in my organization and in my program. And I would get the audience, I would get the ear, and they would take that information and they'd take it with a grain of salt because I had some data to back it up, but not a lot. I had experience. I had the knowledge of what had happened over the years, and I could speak to it. Take something like this system where you've followed people, you've got data points, you've got information, you're collecting it, and you can go back to them and say, our supports and our system has been successful here, 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 and here. Where we have not been successful is when we have people who have severe mental health and addictions who don't have services following them. They are losing their housing at a rate that is different than everybody else. And so we are asking for those supports because we can show you the data that says that when we get someone with mental health issues into housing without those supports, they lose it within 30 days. Mm-hmm. Boom, you've got an argument. And so those are the nice pieces of it, right, that support it.
Yeah, and it's an argument that everyone has access to. So it's not just one agency feeling the weight of having to advocate for that. It's a whole community saying, we're all seeing this data. It's here in front of us, and we're going to support agency X in pushing for this, or we as a community are pushing for it, and agency X is part of that, right? So it really changes advocacy. Yeah, it really does.
It changes it when I'm going in as the director of an organization and asking for this many, mm-hmm. versus us as an organized system saying, this is what we need. Mm-hmm. You can look Jody in the eye and say no. You can't look at all of you in the eye and say no without having a real good, compelling reason. So. As you can tell, I believe in community movement.
Hi, this is Chris. I think that's a really great point. Our program has been in operation for roughly 10 years. And so we meet people who have housing insecurity, and we see things that, are contributing factors that resurface. And when you talk about collecting that data and holding true to that and being able to share it appropriately without violating anyone's confidentiality, it really does tell a much deeper story about what the needs are and how all the supports need to be in place so that the person's supported collectively. Sorry, my son's making lunch in the background. Collectively.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Jody and Lisa, for a great presentation. I learned a lot, and I think the amount of people on the call really shows the community interest in moving this forward. So thanks so much for hosting. I have a couple questions about the data collection. I've heard someone mention HIFIS, and I'm wondering if that is going to be the platform that we're going to use. And if so, I'm just curious about collecting numbers. And we know that in evaluation and reports that numbers don't tell the whole story. And I'm curious if you've ever come up with any situation where the numbers may have worked against you, that we may be pitting community against community. If our numbers aren't as high as others, is that going to, is there a risk of that working against us perhaps? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so HIFIS is something that we will be using. Agencies, that is definitely going to be a data platform for storing. It's secure. It's we will be able to have training on that and everything. So we'll be able to put information into that, and that we can work out as we kind of roll out the system, like community training sessions, and everybody would have access to that. You had talked, the second part of your question was around like collecting numbers. Is that correct? Can you just rephrase that?
I'm just curious if, say, for example, if the feds have access to the data beyond our community of practice, might those numbers, is there a risk that those numbers could be used against us if they're not as high as other communities?
Oh, I see. I don't think there would be a risk, because the federal government would look at it from a provincial standpoint. So the data that they would see is, oh, what's the word, Jody? When it's like
In a cluster?
No, it's like
aggregated.
Yeah, it's aggregated. So they would see it like as Nova Scotia, and they would see it as like the South Shore, I would assume. But that they would be looking at that not necessarily for, like, we would use that data in like advocacy and funding applications. They would look at that data as like being able to understand like different inflow points to homelessness or outflow, or what's working in certain regions versus what might not be working in other regions in Atlantic Canada. So I don't, Jody, you maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it would necessarily affect our individual funding or even future funding applications, because it wouldn't be used in that context from the federal side for that.
I also think that the problem of homelessness across the country is sufficiently serious enough that I don't know that it can undermine us. And I think that one of the things, I think that if careful what you ask for, because the numbers are out there.
Yeah.
And so I don't see it being, I see it actually being the opposite. I think that the numbers are worse than people might want to hear. But I also think that it's one of the things that came up for me when you were asking that, Rhonda, was this idea of, or for me, and it's probably not what you meant, but historically we're all arguing over the same pots of money. And so there is silos and there is secretism between organizations and not necessarily a free flow of information. And I think that what a coordinated access system does is open that up for conversation. So when a community sees gaps, they are able to collaborate together to identify who's going to do what, and take that information to funders to say, this is what we need. So far, I don't believe that there's a place in Canada that the numbers are lower than the funders would want to hear. I would say it's the opposite. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That helps.
Did that help answer your question, Rhonda?
Yeah, I have a really quick part too. My understanding of HIFIS is you're able to put in an anonymous client, and that I think that would be very important for some of the folks that we work with. Jody, your point about some folks may have perhaps a negative experience with another organization, and it may link to personal biases or such. That could be the case, but it could be that they really don't want their name shared with other organizations. So is that an option with our cluster?
So we would have to work through that. I know, and I can just speak to what we had worked out in Moncton. So in my experience in the past, the domestic violence shelter couldn't necessarily share information on their individuals on our by name list, because some of the shelters had individuals working at the shelters that had, been, for lack of a better word, been the inflictor of violence against some of the women that were staying in the domestic violence shelter. So we were able to work out a way where the information could still be gathered and shared. That domestic violence shelter used the VAT, and the community used the SPDAT as an assessment tool. So we worked out a way to communicate that information so individuals would still be able to be referred and prioritized without revealing all of their, I guess, identifying details to where their abusers would know where they were. So there are ways and methods that we can kind of work through that as we progress, and ensure that information is safe, and how we kind of work through things. Did you want to add anything to that, Jody?
No, I think one of the things that is really is great about HIFIS, and maybe has been the bane of the Fed's existence, has been that it has been adaptable. And so as a community requires the information to be created or collected in a certain way, to great degrees they can accommodate that, and that is, with clusters and things. I've worked in communities where, the sum total of all the information is here, but the youth information is here, and identifying details are protected, and the violence against women shelters information is here and it's protected, but it all does blend together at the end for the numbers and for the statistics piece. So I think as you move forward, having those conversations about concerns is really important, but also knowing that this, and I don't mean this flippantly. I think I can be accused of being flippant about this, but trusting that system a little bit, while being aware of past violations of people's privacy, but knowing that this conversation has been had and people have been held to, their feet have been put to the fire enough to know that there are safeguards that can be put in place, and at some point, I'm losing my train of thought, but yeah, this
got it though. You got it.
Over and over again in every community, and it speaks to our need to protect people, and so yeah.
I'm cognizant of the time. I know that we still have a poll to do. Yep. So we've got about 12 minutes left. If there's someone that has a really pressing question, I'm going to leave it. You can ask it now. If not, then I'll get Jody to do the poll, and then we will close. So last call for questions. Anyone have a pressing question?
I did have a question, and maybe it was targeted more at Nelson. I missed his email at the beginning. If I could get that, I could probably ask him. It's more about financials, like and funding through the Energize and this piece of the puzzle, and what that commitment is from the municipality, because I just want to have an overall understanding of what Queens would be looking at in order to get something like this underway. But I can talk to him separately about that. What was your email, Nelson? I got as far as
yeah, so I'll just throw it in the chat. I'd be happy to speak with you. I can kind of break down the budget that we've created,
sure,
for the 5-year implementation and maintenance of the system.
Great.
Yeah, love to have a conversation about that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, go ahead, Jody.
I am going to get people to go to that address that I just put up on the, and maybe if I could get Lisa and Nolan, sorry, hang on. There's one. If one of you could put that address in the chat,
I can do that.
that would be helpful. And then I'm going to, it's really important that you're going to get a little thing right now that says that it's not open. I assure you in about 2 seconds it will be. Do not go through the Google search bar for this. It has to be in the URL bar.
No.
If you try the Google search bar, it won't work. I'm going to stop sharing and I am going to open it up. And as people come in, oops, there we go. As you come in, go ahead and answer the question. You have to remember to press submit.
Oh,
Now we have 9 out of 9 responses. That means that only 9 people are answering the poll so far. I hope there'll be more, but I'm going to wait for just a few more seconds because we do have 26 people on the call. So, and I know that sometimes it takes people a little bit to get in. So I'm going to wait for just a little bit longer.
Especially if they're in rural Nova Scotia.
Yes.
Where it takes me forever. So.
I got 50% right now. We're doing well.
Yeah.
I am going to move to the next question in about 2 seconds. I'm getting an overwhelming picture of the first question anyway. I think it's safe for me to move on, unfortunately.
Okay.
So the next question, what do you believe are the challenges to addressing homelessness in Bridgewater? So this is, you get to put in anything you want. I'm going to give time, and as you put in your response, it'll come up on the screen for other people to see. So I want to give a little bit of time for everybody to put in their responses. And I can guess what some of them are going to be, and as they're coming in, here we are. I'm glad that whoever put that in put suitable as well as affordable. I think that there is that whole conversation about, well, there's housing, and if it's not dignified housing that's safe, it's not housing. Getting a bit of a picture of a trend here, Lisa.
I wonder if it's housing.
Oh, this, yeah. Landlord-tenant dynamics and poverty addictions. Those are, yeah. Resources. Yeah, is housing a problem?
Yeah.
Do I see something about poverty on here?
I did see something.
All right, I'm going to move to the next one. Now, as a town, I'm saying the community, not the town proper, not the town entity. I should have probably made that a little bit clearer. Because I think those are different parts of the same question. Oh, someone's up against
How
it.
does the star, what do I keep doing? The star one,
You got to press submit.
I know, but how do I do, I press on the stars and it's like, it's lighting them all up if I go backwards to completely disagree, but not the other way. What do I click on first?
The stars. I don't.
Okay, I'll just do that one and see what happens.
Okay.
There we go.
Hey.
You got it. There we go. I'm going to move forward. Looks like people are under.
Okay, oh, that was right.
I see a spot for my agency in this project. Lisa, look at this. People like it.
I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
That means we have lots of people that are willing to get in the mud with us. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Here's another question. The connection between coordinated access and energy poverty reduction program. I understand it. Nelson.
Good job, Nelson.
There you
Good job. Yay.
Yay.
Support of what you have put forward today. That is unanimous. Well done.
People are just being really nice, so I appreciate that.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, there's anonymity to online responses. So I think, you know, people have the ability. It's just like a chat forum or comments in Facebook. People are not kind just because they need to be. Here's another text one, putting you to work a little bit. What do you see as the main barriers to creating an effective coordinated access system in Bridgewater? Let us know where you see the pitfalls. Good to have a sense of some of them before we even start.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing, Lisa, nothing. It's all
Good.
good.
It's clear sailing. Oh, darn it.
Oh, darn it.
Portability. There's one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It's truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that trust piece is huge. It can't be underestimated, but really at the end of the day, I have looked at this question upwards and backwards and forwards. And I cannot tell you that I don't see a way forward without, you know, I see a way forward, and trust is just around having those conversations and seeing that larger picture.
Mm-hmm.
And looking beyond the interests of your own agency to the interests of the humans that we serve in our system. Prioritization. That's a big project, and it's but it's amazing once you start having those conversations. People tend to agree.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is really pivotal. Really pivotal. I need to know. I would place myself in the coffee stat.
I'm right there with you. I need coffee.
And thank you for that. I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't want to get in the way of people on their coffee or their lunch, or maybe some much needed bathroom breaks. That's definitely a need. So I'd like to thank every one of you for dedicating 2 hours out of your busy day to join us today. As a follow-up, like I said, the recording will be made available. As well, we're going to make the engagement plan and the project plan available for everyone, and some upcoming dates for January will be sent out shortly. I would expect everything by the end of this week, so you can get it in your calendars. Jody's going to be with us in the process. She'll be, again, my contact, and I'm sure if we're really nice, she may even come to some of our meetings, especially if COVID cooperates. So I'm really looking forward to doing this work with you all. I, again, can't express my thankfulness for you to all show up and be engaged in this process. Thank you so much, Nelson, for your presentation, and you, Jody, as well. And I look forward to seeing and hearing from all of you over the next few weeks and into the new year. So have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Jody.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks very much. That was well done. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.